introducing our speaker for today. And before I actually read her bio, I just want to pause a minute and welcome those of you that might be on the call that are waiting to adopt or maybe have adopted through private infant adoption. Many people aren't aware that we actually have two sides of the house at Adoption Share, which is a nonprofit organization that's created Family Match. We not only have a network for families to help them more quickly and appropriately adopt children from foster care, but we also have a network that connects families that have home studies through private licensed agencies that are interested in being matched with an expectant parent and going through the private infant adoption process. We have a network that connects these families to agencies and attorneys from across the United States that are working with women who are choosing to make an adoption plan for their unborn child. Oftentimes it's unborn. So at that, we have this network, and Christina Mongillo is the director of that network. So I wanted to take a minute. Our team has kind of flagged the fact that we haven't really talked about that side of the house before on this call, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention that we do a lot over here. We don't always talk about it, but we do. And Christina Mongillo is a big part of that. So not only is she the director of our private infant adoption network, Christina is also an adopted parent. She has 8 children, 5 through adoption, 1 actually through our network for private infant adoption. And she formerly served on the board of directors for Adoption Share before stepping down to become more intimately involved in our day-to-day operations by becoming the director of that private infant adoption network. Christina's background is in social work. So like many of us on the team, we have a proclivity for the helping sciences. She is married. She's been married for 18 years, has been a foster parent for a number of years, grew up in New York, but now resides in Georgia. Among many of her other accomplishments, she has owned a daycare. She was an assistant director of an orphanage in the Dominican Republic. She not only is a parent to 8 children, but she also homeschools all of them. So you can only imagine what that must be like. She also, on the side, volunteers at an inner city mission center that serves the homeless and poor in her community, and she's been part of Adoption Share for the past 6 years. So with that, I just want to turn it over to Christina, and Christina's going to be talking to you guys about, as we prepare for the holidays, which can be a big triggering moment for many of the kids that we work with and love on and live in our homes and are part of our families. This talk today is really designed to help kind of talk through how you can best sort of set the table metaphorically, and making sure it's a hit for everyone involved, including your kids that are either being fostered or have been adopted or are in the process of being adopted. So with that, Christina, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. And before I get into any of the maybe ideas that I would love to share with you, I'll just say that I have always loved the holidays. They've always been just a sweet time for me, laughter, good food, good family. Until the fall, when I was 8 years old, my mom passed away. And instantly those holidays became really painful for me. And they were filled with tears and heartache, sadness, some anger, some bitterness. And I really wondered, would happiness ever come back, and would it come back for my holiday time? Soon my dad remarried, and this was like a make or break moment for me as a kid. I don't think I really understood that at the time, but so much of my healing rested at that time in the hands of my new mom. And thankfully, healing did come. She put herself aside, she put her own expectations aside, and she truly looked out for the best interest of me and my siblings. And I saw that healing can come through a non-biological parent, my mom. And so it was around age 11 that I knew I would one day adopt. And so I so badly wanted to adopt and to be a part of lives of children that even my early adult years were so much, revolving around this. Even my first date with my husband, we talked about children and adoption, and thank God it didn't scare him. And after 3 biological children, we stepped into that world of adoption. And as Thea mentioned, we have 5 beautiful adopted children. And one is a sibling group of 4 that came through the foster care system. So we learned to make a lot of mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. I guess we don't learn to make mistakes, we just do them. We learned to listen more to our hearts rather than the lies that whispered that we couldn't do this. We had good days and bad days. So thankfully, we've made some good choices. And I still remember that first holiday without my mom. I remember the pain that I felt. And now I love that I have the honor of being one of the ones that help bring healing and love to our sweet children, and especially during the holidays. So in this brief time together, I'm just going to share with you a little from my personal childhood and through experience as a foster and adoptive mom of foster children, some things that you might find helpful. So, you know the song, The 12 Days of Christmas, so I've got 12 little points. So one of them is help the child understand the season. As odd as it seems, many children from hard places just really don't understand the season. Some just simply don't understand the significance of holidays in general. And it's important to take time to talk about it. Maybe read books, or if they're little, coloring in a coloring book about the holidays and talk while you're coloring. Maybe watch movies and discuss afterward. Sometimes we adults living in America can take for granted just the simple idea of this holiday season. One of our former foster children had been raised by a mom who struggled with drugs, and this child and their siblings had never, ever experienced a typical Thanksgiving day or meal. And our daughter, who was adopted through the foster care system, she had never been to school. She spent most of her days just hanging out in the trailer park. She did not experience a Christmas until our home. She didn't even know what Christmas represented. And I wish someone had pointed out to me that some kids here in America just don't understand that, because I found out through all her many, many questions that kept coming. Finally, I realized that we were about to experience with her very first Christmas. So help the child understand the season. Another one is gifts. In the early days, we found it helpful to bring wrapped small gifts to holiday events and keep them hidden with us when we went to these functions. I kept a bunch of mine wrapped up in the bottom of my purse, which, being a mom of 8, looks more like a suitcase at times. But early on, some family members, they didn't know how to relate to our adopted children. And we found that our biological children sometimes received an extra gift. So we were ready with a small one that we had bought to counteract this and to not allow bitterness to get a foothold. I remember one visit with my own parents. Our biological children received a baby doll with extra outfits. Another one received a remote control car. I forget what the third one received, but it was a pretty big gift. And their cousins received gifts of equal value. Our adopted daughter got a coloring book. And I don't think my parents were intending to be ugly. They just did not know how to relate. So we quietly slipped a few of the gifts from my purse toward our child. And our daughter's tender heart, she had no time to compare, to feel different, to be sad. She had those extra gifts. Now, years have passed, and this no longer occurs at all. They've all been accepted as equal, but something to consider at first, those extra gifts. Another one is the holiday time can bring tough emotions for our adopted children. I know this comes as no surprise to you in the history of the child that you may have. But recognizing that while this is a sweet and precious time for you, it really could bring about feelings for the child, feelings of guilt, anxiety, despair, anger, loss, probably much greater than even I experienced when I was 8. And old memories may even come up. And to recognize that if a child seems more difficult during the holidays, it may really be that they're just having a more difficult time. I found the best thing for us simply is to talk about it, to validate their feelings. It's amazing how a little more love during the holidays can go a long way, not just from our family, but other foster children have shared that. And this is a foster child who was adopted, not ours, but I loved how they expressed this. They said, we all get a little depressed around the holidays, usually more than any other time. And I know that at times I cannot help but cry when I think of my family and what they are up to, and if they even think of me. And we found that our oldest adopted child in those early days, she would be looking very forlorn during the holidays. And sure enough, come to find out she was in deep thought about her biological family. And in that thinking, she allowed guilt to creep in. And we talked to her about it. She was able to express that she wondered if her birth mom was going to have a good holiday, and that she felt bad having a good one if her birth mom wasn't. And we talked about what she would want if she had children. And she said that, of course, she would want her children to be happy wherever they were. And well, anyway, that talk lasted much longer than this, but the gist of it was that, and it seemed to make a big difference. And I honestly do not think that it was my great words of wisdom, because I don't think I have too many great words of wisdom. I think it was just the talking, the listening, the validating her feelings. That made the difference. So just be mindful of the tough emotions. Another one, which leads basically to it from that previous one, is listen to the heart of your child. Even before the holidays are in full swing, right now, take time to listen to their heart. Even try to see what part of the holiday conversation might bring a smile on their faces. What are they daydreaming about or talking about that seems to add that sweetness to their demeanor? Okay, for our family, it was mangoes. And that may sound silly, but no one in our family ever liked mangoes. So we just never, ever, ever bought them. But one day, as we were talking to our adopted children, we heard the mention of mangoes around the Christmas holiday. And one of our children actually began hopping up and down in the kitchen with excitement at the mention of mangoes. We'll come to find out that the fruit mango connected her with the happiest thoughts about Thanksgiving. So don't you know that there will always be mangoes in our home around Thanksgiving, and if I remember, other times of the year too. So I encourage you to find that thing that brings a sweet memory to them and include it if you're able to. Another one would be following the child's lead, making sure that extended family are aware of the most recent adoptions, and if need be, guiding those conversations that could prove detrimental to your child. This is really important. Being vigilant and watchful of your child's mood. This is really important, especially during the extended family gatherings. As exciting as this can be for us newly adopted parents, this can be really hard and emotionally draining for our kids. So be mindful maybe to even encourage you to have those debriefing times after the extended family gathering. Talk about it. What did they experience? What were they thinking? And being aware more of the child's lead in conversations can prove really helpful. So one of our adopted children, we were at a family function in the early days, and she was listening to the adults at the gathering right after adoption, asked lots of questions, and everyone had great comments and questions and were excited. But I noticed our adopted child kept interrupting and asking almost silly random questions like, Mama, what's your favorite toy? Do you want to color a picture with me? What's your favorite color? Well, soon, although I wished it was sooner, I realized that in her own way, she was trying to divert the conversation to another topic. Finally, I understood and I followed her lead. And after that, I was way more aware to follow all our adopted children's lead in the future. Follow the child's lead. This leads to my next one. Our child always comes before curiosity. Our child comes before answering questions. Be aware and mindful of those conversations, because extended family and friends may genuinely be excited, especially during the holiday season, and they probably want to hear the whole story of the adoption. But be mindful that the details, those small details of the story, they do not need to be shared. And especially for the sake of that child, be aware where they are. We've even had to talk to family members in advance about topics that we would not like brought up. But of course, there are those times that we're at a place that we didn't get to speak to someone, and someone brings up a question that could prove painful and could bring sadness for our child on a holiday event that should be a happy day. So we've remembered that this sweet child comes before curiosity, comes before answering those questions. And many times we've even had to use those cutesy, kind, but bold answers to end the conversation in a polite way. And almost always, when I glance at our child, I am receiving that smile of great gratitude, showing that they come first. Another would be consider the size and even the frequency of these holiday events. If adoption is most recent in your lives, as I'm sure for many of you it is, consider keeping the holiday events small. We know all too well how excited our family and friends are to meet your child. And if you are still in those early days, you may want to be mindful of attachment. We found it very helpful during the early months to limit the size and even the amounts of those big events until that comfort level set in. My husband and I, we come from fairly larger families. I'm one of 5 siblings. My husband's one of 6 siblings. And so they all have families of their own. So just a little small get together with our siblings can be a rather big event. And in those days, we realized we had to take bite-sized visits with smaller groups of family and friends. And it proved so helpful. Not only was that fear of a large unknown crowd instantly removed, we also saw the connections between family members and our adopted children grow much greater in these smaller settings. So consider the size and frequency of those holiday events. Another is even, and you're probably aware of this, but even some of our family members, literally they're strangers to our adopted children. So I just encourage you to be mindful that many of these children do come from hard places. And while we love our family, they are strangers to our children. We had one child that, until we spent years working through it, but in the beginning, she was utterly frightened to the point of hiding under tables if a certain race of people were at the door, because this race of people reminded her of the social workers that needed to remove her from her birth mom's home years ago. So be okay with your child giving high fives or waves or handshakes or fist bumps, because hugs and close physical contact, even during the holidays, may be just too much, or they may trigger negative emotions like it did for our daughter. Let that trust just grow with time. Another is, and I love this one, but possibly serve together as a family. One thing that we have found most helpful during the holidays was to serve in community places as a family. It took the focus off of ourselves, and it allowed us an opportunity to help someone else who may be in even greater need. We had, at times, we would take our children out to dinner or ice cream afterward and just talk about the experience. It was always a precious time. And it proved to be so vitally important for our family, so much so that we as a family decided to incorporate this as a weekly thing. And so 6 years later, we are still doing that weekly. Now, this may not be feasible for you to do a weekly service project for your family, but perhaps you can consider a holiday time that you can fit this into the calendar. I think you would find it absolutely amazing to the building of your family. And these are just a few things we've done to build our family, and ones we still talk about. We will serve together at a community center. We'll visit a nursing home. We will use the gifts that the children have of music or drawing or dance to entertain or provide gifts for a veteran home. We'll serve a holiday meal to the homeless. We'll serve at a church together. And one of their favorites is playing Secret Santa. We will secretly choose a family, and we secretly buy for every member of the family, and then we secretly drop it off. We've even added a Santa Claus outfit for my husband. So he ho-hos at the door, and we have the getaway car ready, and it is wonderful. And we go out to dinner. But what it does is it takes the focus off of what could be a hard time. And you may think it's about the one you're serving, but in the end, you realize that there are few things that can compare to forming a strong family unit than by using the talents you have been given to better the lives of someone else and doing it side by side with parents and children. You realize the purpose you have. So consider that, serving together during the holidays. Another one is a reminder that structure goes way down during the holidays, and we need to be mindful of this. I'm an adult, and I have to admit that even I am tempted to throw a temper tantrum at times during the holidays, especially when it comes to my calendar so full I can't add another thing, or stores, or just shopping in general. And keeping that thought in mind as I parent our children has helped me. Even during the holidays, we try to keep a structured day, especially during that holiday break from school. If you were at our home in those early months of adoption, you would have found a schedule on a refrigerator during the school holiday break. Now, mind you, it was a schedule of quote unquote fun, but it was a schedule nonetheless. Before this, with that lack of structure, I had oftentimes unknowingly even set my family up to fail that day. But the structured day gave everybody a plan, and everyone could mentally and emotionally prepare for that week or for just that day ahead. So be mindful of that and consider a structured time, which would lead to the next one. While structure can go down, the stimulus can go way up during the holidays. There are many events and parties and activities, and the stimuli just goes up. And with that, oftentimes our children are just off schedule, not only with their structured day, but with what they eat. And most times during the holidays, they're eating way more sugar, way more candy and desserts with colored dyes. For our family, we noticed rather quickly how the chemical dyes affected their behavior, and it made the holiday time so much harder for them and all of us. So we began baking cookies and muffins, from scratch. I knew all the ingredients, and we'd freeze them, a whole bunch of them. And we worked out a deal with the children that if they brought home all the colored candy that they received at a school or a party or from wherever, they could cash it in for one of the frozen treats. And I could count on one hand how many times someone opted to not do that. And this helped us tremendously as we maneuver through the holidays with behavior. Another one, interesting point would be traveling during the holidays. Traveling can be fun. It's exciting. For me, it's especially exciting during the holidays because, as Thea mentioned earlier, I'm originally from New York, so is my husband. So we live in Georgia with no blood family here of any kind. So we love to travel. But we quickly realized that it can also cause great anxiety for our adopted children. And we have found that taking that extra time before a trip to create a visual reduced anxiety. It allowed for conversations and clarifications, and it assisted in making the trip sweeter for everybody. So for like a big trip, I would print off pictures of where we were going, even the hotel we would stay in, and I'd put them in a binder, and each page had a photo of where we would be and what we would do and the date at the top. And it may sound like a lot of work, but it literally took me maybe an hour and so worth it. And it concluded with a photo of our home and when we would return home. And this worked amazingly. It worked so well that although we greatly modified it, we still do this version every year when we are gifting the family their surprise Christmas trip. Now it's become more of a scrapbook for fun, but in those early days, it was almost vital to ensure a good trip. So be mindful of your traveling. And to me, one of the most important ones is love. There is an old saying. It says, sometimes we put up walls not to keep people out, but to see who loves enough to knock them down. And I remember a time with a teen who was in our lives, beautiful teenager, but she had put up such thick walls, and I just was not going to let her push me away that easily. She was entering a deep and dark place, but in great gentleness, I persisted. I just kept loving. And one day, she buried herself in my arms, and she wept and wept. And when she caught her breath, she said, I have been waiting for you. That day, her walls began to come tumbling down. There are so many old proverbs that say, love can knock down walls, or love can melt hearts of stone. But it's not that butterfly feeling kind of love that you have on that first date. I've come to find out that love is not just a feeling, it's a verb. It's something you do, it's action. And the best definition I found is love protects, it's kind and patient, love keeps no record of wrongs, love never gives up, love never loses faith, love is always hopeful, and love always endures through it all. And I remember that day that I made a vow to try to just to show that love, the verb love, to our adopted children. Yes, I still put the cutesy little notes out here and there, but to truly show that verb love, to love most on the days when they needed it most, the days when they were having the hardest time. And what a difference. For our family, the hardest days when the children needed it most was oftentimes during the holidays. So may I encourage you to view love as a verb and aim to really love that child of yours. even when it seems the absolute hardest to do so. So those were 12 points that I had. And in closing, I just want to encourage you, don't aim for that absolute ideal holiday, but be realistic. Roll with what may come and have a great sense of humor, because the first year of holidays, they're not going to be exactly as you imagined. But as you remain aware and open, talking and listening, as you remain vigilant and considerate, and most of all, as you remain loving, you and your child and your family unit will draw closer together, closer each and every day. And you'll find that you make new ideas for the holidays and that they're just as sweet and they bring with it precious new traditions and new memories. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to share today.